Wild and Woolly Ozarks, episode number 20. Vincent Anderson and the Bigfoots of the Ozarks. Gather up the kids and the old folks. Shut down the contraptions and dim the lights. Put away your pocket-sized magic lantern shows. Close your eyes and listen. It's time to strike off on the paths less traveled, down dark trails through the hills and hollers, along the riverbanks and into the brush. Hear tales of things forgotten yet told. Join me as we venture into the wild and woolly Ozarks. I'm your native guide and host, Champ Heron. Welcome back, gentle people. Thank you again for finding your way to our fireside. Pull up a chair and rest yourself. Tonight, we have quite a tale. If you haven't subscribed, followed, joined, or made any other public declaration of support, please do so now. It helps us out, and it helps grow and upgrade the podcast. Maybe you noticed we've added a little music, and we have sort of a professional take on it now, even though the host is still fair to middling. Please share the podcast. Please share it with other folks who are interested in the Ozarks. And go over to social media on Facebook. Give us a like. You can keep up with what's going on there. All of this helps bring more exciting guests like Vince today. To all our friends and neighbors who tell me they love the podcast, suggest topics and guests, thank you kindly. Y'all are the best. I've gotten some pretty interesting communiques over the last couple weeks. So thank you. If there's a mystery you want us to plumb, maybe a wild and woolly piece of Ozarks history you'd like to share, we welcome you to drop us a line at wildandwoollyozarks@gmail.com. Once again, I was getting ready to do the nostalgia page for the Marshfield Mail. I was putting it together, and I think I was myself working on the 125, or maybe we had some older episodes. We could run something even older, and I encountered a story in Webster County about a wild man. Now, this wild man was described as a very dirty man. He was wearing some clothes, but they were very ragged, and he had a large pistol. Okay. He ran away and acted just like a wild creature. And I thought that was very interesting. And it crossed my mind of Bigfoot and other things, but I really didn't think about it until I decided I would just search it one night. And lo and behold, a lot of it led me to tonight's episode and to our guest, because I found his research. It's a fun thing to stalk guests, as I did with several of them. And it's another thing when you don't ever actually get to meet, but you kind of become friends on the way, and you have wonderful conversations. And I'm talking about Vincent Anderson. Now I'm going to introduce Vincent here, and we're going to go into what is a wild man and maybe what is. I'm going to share a few articles at the time that I found particularly amusing. But let's talk about Vince here a minute. Vincent Anderson is an Ozark historian, radio host, researcher, and storyteller based in Baxter County, Arkansas. Known for blending deep archival research with vivid narrative. You really did work on that, didn't you? He
I
has
did.
become a respected voice of history, folklore, and forgotten people of the Ozarks and the White River Valley. He's a historian of the weekly KTLO radio program, Retracing Our Roots, where he explores the region's hidden histories, Civil War stories, frontier settlements, river cultures, cemeteries, folklore, and the lives of ordinary Ozarks who helped shape the American frontier. I think that's a noble undertaking. He also works at the Baxter County Library, and he's the Baxter County historian. He's contributed to historical preservation, Arkansas history education frameworks, newspaper columns, and regional researcher projects. Vincent holds a bachelor's degree in Hebrew studies and middle-level education, along with a graduate degree in American history. His academic background and field research, archival investigation, storytelling, theology, folklore, regional history. Now, I'm going to let him tell a little bit of the rest of this when we get into it. Okay. But suffice to say that Vince is accomplished is an understatement. And I really want to, Vince, welcome to the Wild and Woolly Ozarks. I'm so glad to have you with us.
Thank you for the welcome.
And I noticed you didn't include your social security number and the last 3 addresses you had in that bio. I thought, maybe you might, but anyway.
Yeah. Well, I'm an educated hillbilly, and I've had people they've told me that out of disdain, and actually it's just pretty much of a compliment. And so, that's all right.
It's not derogatory in my household. It's just how it is.
You're right.
In the news press of Southwest Missouri, and I'm sure Arkansas too, there are reports of wild men. Okay.
Yes.
I'll read you the one that I originally ran across from 1877. It goes something like this, very short. A wild man, so-called, has been frightening the inhabitants of Wright and Webster counties at intervals for several months by suddenly appearing and disappearing. The recent cold weather appears to have had a subduing effect upon him, however, causing him to seek shelter and food. A correspondent for the Marshfield Chronicle writes that that paper that the man is very poorly clad, recently come to the residence of Arch Young, who lives 4 miles west of Hartville. He's described as a large, able-bodied man, 35 years old, with long hair, coarse, shaggy beard, and stands with his legs bent. He talks rationally, but never speaks unless spoken to, and only in monosyllables. Okay. And they have to run him off. That's what happens there. Now, if we go to the Clinton papers, so that's in 1877, and you have this man that's out there. Then you go to the Clinton Daily Democrat, wild man in Leesville, posse search for strange and uncouth madman. And basically, he is described as almost naked with long hair on his body, unkempt and bushy hair and a beard, and a fierce, maniacal appearance. He has tattered shoes but no stockings.
Oh.
Almost naked. Now, if you care to track down Wild Man in Clinton, Missouri on newspapers.com, during this period of 1897, May through July, or March through July of 1897, you are going to find that this is gradually, he goes from, and I think that's not the first report. He's totally covered with hair. He's totally ape-like. He totally has a fearsome countenance that is neither man nor beast. He's a missing link. He's this, he's that, he's one thing and the other. And then he's just some mentally ill soul out there in clothes, that has been, we have to think about lead toxicity and poisoning and other things that were virtually untreated. You had no mental health facilities, and you had people, all these broken lives after the Civil War, where people were wandering around. Uh, you know, I don't PTSD,
Yeah.
just untreated, um, mania of one form or another, I think is the term of the time. So that's the framework of the wild man that I encountered. And I always thought, man, wouldn't it be something to find a vintage report of a Bigfoot? And then I found Vince.
Yes.
And and actually I found you and several others, but go ahead, Vince, and talk
Sure.
to us a little bit. You see where I'm going with this on the
I see. I
wild
see.
man thing.
You know what? And I think you're actually on a really good stream here of the wild man. Uh, years ago in 2011, I was going through, and all of a sudden I fell into this little rabbit hole, and I found some news articles that I was looking for on a Sasquatch. And so I go back and I find this article, and it's reprinted a couple times, and it turns out to be in the northern part of Ozark County, southern part of Douglas County, right on the county line up in Missouri. And and so that was in 2011. 2013, I posted on my blog. Didn't think a thing about it. Just thought it was a very, a unique story. Didn't really get into it much. The very first story of him, it's a wild man story, basically, because he's a gigantic figure. He's stark naked except for a breechcloth. And on the shoulder, a piece of animal skin. Huge body was covered with long hair. It's so as thick as any wild animal. Now think about this. And the man's feet had rude moccasins of deerskin tied with thongs of leather. At the end of the thongs, there were claws on the end to make marks in the snow. That is not a Sasquatch, in my opinion, at all. It could be a wild man. And honestly, the very first sighting of this would be in 1865. And the title given to this wild man would be the Blue Man. And this is what they call the Sasquatch in central Missouri and Ozark County, Douglas County, Howell County area. It would be the Blue Man, named after Old Blue Solomon Collins, wore a blue jacket because he was an old soldier with the Union, and Old Solomon Blue, or Blue saw this man, and they named, because it's Blue Solomon, they named this creature or this person the Blue Man of Missouri. And so, but I have a few issues with this. And so a couple years later, I get a phone call from Finding Bigfoot. And so they want to come out and do a
Let me
story.
ask you a question, because
Yes.
so did they report him having a weapon?
He was
Or,
actually carrying a long staff, 6 to 8 feet long.
you know what it sounds like? It sounds like a caveman.
To me, I could see that.
Or like a Clovis people,
How about, I'm going to throw something out to you as a historian. How about an Osage warrior? This is 1865. The Osage had signed a treaty with the United States, left the Ozarks. They signed the treaty in 1825. The last group to tag out of the Ozarks to go up into Indian Territory, Oklahoma, would be 1826. I don't have a problem with historically. I have a problem with this being a Sasquatch at first on this one right here. I have what we have here. We have somebody has enough skill to make moccasins, a breech or loincloth, and to have some a deer skin or some be clothed with fur. That sounds like it could be a buffalo cape, a deer hide, whatever, elk, and so I was of the opinion that's what we have here. when I was on Finding Bigfoot and we did the show of Finding Bigfoot, they asked me what my opinion was. We talked about the gigantic figure, and but the problem is when they filmed my opinion never came on the show. It was just that was edited out. And because I went through the whole scenario here, and then they said, "Well, what do you think it is?" And I said, "I believe it could be a wild man." Even the newspaper called it an 1865. In 1865, it was the wild man. But he disappeared. After that, I am not finding any other times that he appears is in 1874. My goodness, in 1890, in 1911, and 1915. He pops up. There's nothing about him wearing garments, but they do notice that he's getting mighty thin and his hair is turning grayish white. So he's graying. The blue man is turning gray. And so they're out there chasing him, and all these different times that he shows up. My opinion, honestly, if you read about the Osage warriors, George Catlin, he chronicles about the Osage Nation. And as he chronicles about the Osage Nation, I got an excerpt here. It says, the Osages may justly be said the tallest race of men in North America, being very few indeed of men. At their full growth, they are no less than 6 feet in stature, and very many of them 6.5, and others 7 feet tall. That's a pretty tall guy. And so,
well, yeah, when the average Civil War soldier's what, 5'7"?
5'7" to 5'9".
Yeah.
That's what you're 5'7" to 5'9", and you have a warrior. Let's give somebody 7 feet tall, and then he's going to come out of the prairie, out of the woods, and then he's going to have his head shaved. He's going to have feathers sticking up in the air, which is going to put him pretty massively intimidating. You put on him a buffalo robe or whatever, thongs, with moccasins, a loincloth. I think that's more of an Osage warrior that's come back to the Ozarks that knows the territory still yet, because they were all the way up into the Osage River and all the way up to the Missouri River for the Little Osage Nation. And so I don't have a problem with that being a Osage warrior, actually. Now, the other times with other people chasing the wild man, there is nothing about the wild man being dressed or anything else that he's running down the hill. He's catching pigs or hogs and sheep and running off with them. And so these could be two different species. There is also the rumor back then, folks, this is just what history reads and everything else, that he could be a mix of, as they would say, Native American and Spanish. And because of that, he got the best of all genes, and he is just a big, tall warrior. And so it would call Indian Spanish half-breeds. That's exactly what the newspaper would say and what they figured it might be. And so that's the first excerpt I really found of the wild man, or we can have the Sasquatch in the Ozarks. But then over the years, the story still prevails of the blue man in the Ozarks, which turns out to be more people, having the sightings of it. It would be more of a Sasquatch being. And so we end up with it. The story kind of migrates to being a Sasquatch. And so it could be two different entities. I have no idea.
Vince, I've got something a little bit to add to this.
Okay.
That I did not intend to tell when I got on here, but it is so apropos to what we're talking about.
Please do.
So 20 years ago, I was in the Medicare insurance business, handling drug plans and the like, and I had a great career. And I worked closely in rural areas with pharmacies who needed to make sure that these people who were just put into a government plan, that their stuff covered. If the state put you in there, the state necessarily wouldn't check your medicines to make sure you could get what
Oh,
you needed.
right.
So I made a very good living just helping these people out. And I had this pharmacy gave me this lady in southern Douglas County, let's just say. I was closer to Rockbridge than I was to Ava, we'll just say that.
Rockbridge
And,
is the hot area.
well, let me tell you why. So I get to this house, and it's down a lonely road, and I pass it first because I mistake the numbers on the mailbox, and it's like a mile from the highway, and it's like a half mile to the other person down on the lane. And so we get in there, and I take care and help the lady. And one thing we're always very cognizant is if someone has mental problems or is displaying any form of memory loss or dementia, then we're supposed to back off and not do anything because they may not be really capable of making a decision. You need to
Oh,
get a kid involved or a caretaker or
right.
whoever. And so I was visiting with this lady, and she said, well, do you live out here all by yourself? And she says, well, my daughter works in town, and she'll be out here shortly, and she wants to see what we're going to do. Of course, no problem. And so I get to visiting with her, and she said, yeah, my husband and I, we built this place, and he passed away, and I've been out here several years by myself. And I said, wow. I said, you keep this place just beautiful. And it was a nice place. Had a big, long, screened-in porch across the front. And then 20 yards past that was a old boat and a wood pile, big wood pile, because they burned wood.
Right.
And I said to her, I said, well, what if something happens out here? I said, ice storm or whatever, you'd be out here for days before anybody could get to you. She said, well, there are some people that come and help me out. I'm like, oh, neighbors or friends or church? No. These people live in the woods. And I said, because then I'm still in insurance agent mode. I'm having a casual conversation, filling out some paperwork here.
Right. Right.
And I'm like, really? What do they do? Said, well, they come up and they put wood on the porch in the middle of the night, and they sleep outside my bedroom window. I said, okay. I said, who are they? She said, don't really know. She said, there's a man and an old woman. There's a couple of kids, and I leave them out food. I leave them out clothes. Well, I'm thinking she's absolutely batty. If you all know who this is, I mean, no disrespect. That was my thought at the time.
Right.
And I'm sure she's since passed away. But it come to find out her daughter got home, and yes, legitimately, there were people sneaking up there at night. She'd leave them coats. There were some children, and they absolutely believed this. And I don't think they were trying to spook me out. But
Right.
when we left, guess what? It was dark. Because, it's like February in the Ozarks. So it's dark at like 5 o'clock.
It is.
And I'm walking out to my car. Now, I always carried a pistol with me in my briefcase. Anywhere I go, I always did. May still do. Guess if you want to mug me, you can guess. But the point is I was like, oh, that thing's in the car. And just then I saw a man run past the wood pile. I said, I'm out of here.
Are you serious?
I'm serious. Now,
Oh, my goodness.
whether that was somebody, I have no idea what I saw. I'll be
Right.
the first one to say. But after sitting there and listening to these people, who were by all means completely rational, there was not any wink, wink. I'll see if he'll buy this or not. Anyway, So my thought has been that there are feral people in the Ozarks. I've had other people tell me this too. Is that, had you ever encountered that?
Uh, I know of older stories throughout Ozark County Times, one called Snaky George, actually, I believe. But there was other stories that
Snaky George.
and he was very good with snakes. Um, anyway, I have heard of the feral of that being true. But as you, I'm just going to have to say this. So you brought up Rockbridge. When we shot the show of Finding Bigfoot, we all carpooled from Rockbridge into the middle of absolute nowhere into the hills to shoot the show where this blue man was sighted over the years, which was only about a 15-minute drive from Rockbridge. And in that same area, there are people that I know of people that have encountered, and I have heard a lot of wacky stories. Okay, Champ, I've just heard a lot of them because people want to be on the show. And so I was contacted even after the show of all these stories. And out of all the stories, there are, I can say 3 stories that are solid and I have no explanation except, okay, there's no other reasonable explanation. There's no wildman explanation. It's probably a Sasquatch or something like that. I have not physically seen one, but a gentleman actually was squirrel hunting, and he threw his 22 rifle up, looked through the scope, and went up a tree, and all of a sudden, he encountered one up in a tree, staring right through his scope, right back at him. And
A Sasquatch?
yes,
Okay, so no sign of clothes, no
no,
no
no,
tattered socks or
no,
shoes or no revolver. Okay.
no. The reason I have to believe him is that I went and spent 3 evenings, long nights and evenings, with a gentleman who was out of anywhere in the United States, one of the best experts on Sasquatch. His name is Clifford LeBrock. He
Now hold
passed.
on. Was that before we get into Clifford? Because I want to get into Clifford and I want you to spill your guts.
Okay,
But before we
I
do
will.
that, so I left that part out of your bio because I wanted you to kind of unpack your chronology as far as you start researching this, and then all of a sudden you get this call. And can you take us through that a little bit? Because
Sure.
that's a wonderful story
I
in and of
actually get
itself.
the call, and I have 2 months to do research, and then I'm going to meet the producers
How'd they
over.
find you, though?
Uh, honestly, that story I posted on Ozarks History, my blog spot, and I
Nice
chuckled and
plug. Well done, sir.
thank you. I didn't think about that. I thought, are you serious? You really want to do that? And they said, well, um, I, I had already done something on another show on the Sci-Fi Channel, and
Okay.
so they kind of heard my name around over there in California, and so they saw my website, and then they got a hold of me. I had 2 months. I knew I had 2 months before the producers would show up in Branson, and I would meet with them for a few days and work on the script and everything else. So I knew of Clifford that lived, oh, he lived probably 25, 30 minutes from me here in Baxter County. Um, as a crow fly, it was probably only 10 minutes, but it didn't take, but when you have to drive the roads to get where he lived at, it was a long ways. So anyway, I went and started talking to him, and it took me a whole evening, a long evening, for him to trust me and me to trust him, basically. And we became friends. And then he
What were
started.
his fears? I know you've shared that with me before, but what was he afraid of? Was he afraid of what you would do with the information, or was he just really closely
ridic-
guarded?
the man had been ridiculed for years. But I want to say something
Okay.
about the gentleman. This man was not he was not a lunatic. We're talking about a Navy SEAL who owned a golf club manufacturing place of his own, was rated one of the best craftsmen for golf. I mean, he didn't run around, you know, he had so much to lose by letting loose of the story and his experience. He had so much to lose, but after a while, he's like, I don't care. His experience, and I listened to his experience. And then the second night, he knew what I was doing. He says, okay, you're going to get a lot of stories. He says, you need to learn how to weed through what's true and what's not true. And he started sharing with me on some of those issues like that. And I knew of a story that happened up there near Rockbridge, and it mirrored Clifford's story, or Cliff's story, so well. And I talked to him, and it was a mirror image, and they didn't know each other. They did not share information back and forth. They knew nothing of each other and their stories. And I've only met one other person that could do that. So between Cliff, the guy up near Rockbridge, and someone else, all the others.
Give us the funniest one. There's some of them that I'm sure give you a chuckle when you look back on it now.
Going down the freeway chasing them between Branson and man, I don't want to I'm not making fun of it's just some of the stories of running down the freeway with one chasing them on the freeway. I'm like, okay, and I will listen. I respect them. Whatever,
Okay.
Everyone has a story, but I'm not going to ridicule them. But I've just heard some really whoppers. Now, okay. Since you mentioned the lady, I'm going to say this. Clifford also talked about they know when females are in a house. They have a wonderful sense of smell, and they can be very protective of certain women in a house, and so they are great protectors. You can cross them, and they will, if they think you're going after, if a human being is going after them or whatever, you're gonna encounter the wrath, basically. I'm trying to be very discreet here, but in certain times of the month, they have an excellent sense of smell, and they know where females are at. And so that is another thing. And when you mention this story of this lady out there by herself, and that someone's taking care of her or looking out for her, and no, there can be another family out there, but that is another attribute that Cliff actually shared with me. And I'm like, wow. And so,
well, just to be clear, these were people, according to them,
okay,
that were wearing clothes. And it's like,
okay.
She's like, yeah, they didn't have many clothes. So I went to the thrift store in Ava, and I got some coats. And then we had a big ham bone and some stuff on it left. And I fixed up a little plate and set it out there at night. And they sleep outside. Oh, that was the other thing. They sleep outside my window. And when I turn off my light, I knock on the wall and say goodnight. And they knock back and say goodnight, Mom. And it was a woman that she said was like a senior citizen and a man.
There's the three people that I met that I really believe they had an encounter. And you can ask their family. It was a life-changing experience. And the one lady told me her husband changed so much. She said, the day he came to Jesus, he changed. I said, okay. She said, the day he encountered that Sasquatch, my husband hasn't been the same since. He changed on the inside. It changed him. And that is another thing that Cliff said, when you have a true encounter, it's going to change every part about your aspect of your person. It's a life-changing thing. And towards the end of Cliff's life, I didn't do it, but he asked me 3 times, and it just didn't work out on my, honestly, just didn't work out on my schedule, to go out in the evening and set out on a 5-gallon bucket up against a tree. He knew where to sit at, and they would come up to him and he would have an encounter with them. And
Wow.
the first time he called me up that evening, and I'll be honest with you, I believed him so much. I didn't want to deal with that. I'll just be honest with you. And but he says it takes a while, and he said, and he lived in the Norfolk area, which is down there where the Norfolk River, the big Norfolk River, runs into the White River at Norfolk, Arkansas. He lived in that general area. And he says they travel on certain causeways and paths along railroads. So there's a railroad there. He said at confluences of streams and rivers, which you have the Norfolk Dam 5 miles down, then you have with the Norfolk River, and then you go into the White River. He said this is the perfect spot with the railroad, with everything else. And he said this is one of the best places for them to be at. And he says the Ozarks is a really good place for hiding. He says because there's a lot of areas for that. He said, but the wintertime and the fall time is actually one of the best times of the year. The other thing that I thought was
Do they
unique,
migrate, or is that why is that?
he believed that there was a possibility of them migrating, but he also believed that they just didn't. They would walk and guard. He said they were guardians. Said, what are they guarding? He said, Vince, I don't know. But he says this is the sense that I'm getting, and you don't want to cross them in what they're doing. He said, but also they were not. And so here's we're gonna. So I'm going to step out of my historian shoes, and I'm going to get into my I don't know, spiritual hat or whatever. But he and I both talked. What are they?
Correct. That's always the question. Are they a Gigantopithecus? Are they a other missing link? Is it a bear that's
This
what is it?
This is what he told me, and you know what? And so he believes that these are mixed between, well, we talked about Genesis chapter 6, verse 4. The sons of God came unto the daughters of men, and there became giants upon the earth. He believed that they were part of some species of a Nephilim, giants. But he said this is the problem. He says they can run off, and he says, and they can go down the pathway, they can go down the railroad to the side or whatever, and he says all of a sudden you see the footprint and it's gone. He said they go into different spaces. I said, well, what's a different space? He says they're portals. He says that's why you can be tracking them, and all of a sudden you see the foot and there's nothing else. He says that's where, he said he believed that they could be portals that they were popping in and out of. So we're talking about an interdimensional being. And so he read some of my stuff that I had on researched, and he said, well, I don't think, like the first one in 1865 up there on Spring Creek, he said, I don't really think that is a Nephilim or a Sasquatch. He says, I believe that could be something else of a man. But the other stories, there are other stories. His encounter, he in Ohio, southern Ohio, he sat there. He went out to his car to get in his glove box, had a weapon in there, had a pistol, 9mm. And he reached over into the glove box. He's sitting in the driver's seat. The door closes. He's reaching over. He opens it up and pulls out this 9mm. And all of a sudden, there comes this Sasquatch leaning up again, coming up to the car, leaning down at him. And here's another attribute of a Sasquatch. He said it leaned down at him and it grimaced. and basically was like, "How dare you?" And he said, "I put I put the gun up." He says, "I was going to pull the trigger." And he says, "That thing did not speak to me with his lips. It spoke to me in my brain." So telepathically. And
Well, if
he says that's when I knew they were totally different than what people are talking about on the radio or TV or news. And this is in 1977 that he had his first encounter, and because of that encounter, it changed him. It literally changed him. We're talking
I
about a
bet.
Navy SEAL that was shook. Try to shake a Navy SEAL, okay?
Yeah.
Uh, to the point of messing your pants
Wow.
and then passing out. And he had a hard time remembering some of the things that went on. So he remembered some things, but he went to finally and had a memory regression technique to help him remember everything that was going on. And at the time, his current wife, I believe, or friends or something like that, witnessed the whole ordeal from their cabin, and he's in the car. So it was totally life changing enough so that he would, in 1977, it happened. He decided and commissioned an artist, a sculptor, to build a Sasquatch replica. And there's there's pictures of me on it, and I've posted on my Facebook, my website, standing up next to it. And when you walk into his house, he had a small little house. I don't know how he had to wiggle that thing to get
I've
it in there.
seen the pictures. It's
Oh, have
massive.
you?
We'll post
It,
them. We're gonna post them on Facebook. We'll
okay,
whichever one
just
you think best, send it. And we'll.
yeah, it's just impressive just to stand there and look at the hands. And so and you're sitting there in the living room talking to him, and that thing's just standing there looking at you. And I will say the very last time I kept going and visiting with him. One of the last evenings I visited with him, I saw a VCR tape, and it was out on the West Coast, and I saw a juvenile Sasquatch. Because when
Okay.
I walked out, he says, "What do you think that creature was?" I said, and the thing, dadgummit, it was ambidextrous. How in the world are
Huh.
you going to pull that off in the 80s in a gorilla suit from Kmart or wherever or Hollywood that's going to stand in a stream, look down with his hand, and all of a sudden snag a trout with one hand and then do another snag with the other hand ambidextrously?
See, that's now I've got a whole lot to ask on this, but if anyone has ever been up and seen the salmon run, you would imagine that a being that's 7, 8, 9 feet or more tall would have enormous dietary requirements.
Yes.
You would think that. Forget they can go into some portal and get food and come back out or whatever. Maybe they have a Sonic in there. I don't know. But my point is, which I want to go see Bigfoot Sonic. Anyway, just saying. But I would see it if you were in the Pacific Northwest and you're up where you get those big salmon runs and other things, at least as a part of their migration.
Right.
'Cause
And
I've read stuff
that's where
where
it
they
was
talk
at.
about they winter in Texas and they go as far as the Great Lakes in the summer. Who knows? I mean, when you start talking about Bigfoot, thanks to modern media, there's so much stuff that really isn't correct that's out there. So you don't know
Yeah.
what to store.
Right.
I've heard there's some reports from the 60s about Bigfoots that would actually partially be clothed and could grunt a few words and would, once again, to your point, we're protecting this certain farm and different things. But you don't know really, until you have a body or until you
Right. I
interview
get it.
one, if you're a Sasquatch watching this, hey, the invitation is there. I
There
will
you
be
go.
tickled to death to interview you. I hope you have suitable technology on your end because, yeah. Anyway, that's our kind of running joke about my inability with technology. So, um, so how many? So this gentleman relocated to Ozark County,
No, Baxter County,
Baxter County, Arkansas. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
southern part of Baxter County.
Okay.
And he when he moved in, he came and introduced himself to me there at the library, and said, if you ever get a chance, I would just love to talk to you and pick your brain and see what you think about certain things. And about a year later, that's when all this came up, and I'm on the phone going, "Hey, I need to talk to you about a few things." And
Did he? How did that? I mean, had you already written some stuff on it, and he was curious, or
yes, I
okay?
had done the research through the newspapers, and then I had talked to one other person, and I've talked to other people, but I had one other person who had an encounter. I'm like, "Dadgum, that's odd," but
Hmm.
it wasn't the run of the mill stories that you just hear all the time. I mean, it had some unique traits to it. And so I called him up, and when the first time he met me, he came and he gave me, I have them at my other office. I think he gave me a dozen photographs of the building of the Sasquatch. And at that time, when he had it built, it would cost him $10,000, which today, no telling how much that thing would cost. But he was so convinced of this right here. He was dropping the money on it, and he was having it built. Um, I asked him, did it cause family issues? And he said yes. And but somebody had that kind of experience. Um, I wasn't gonna poo poo it. I was going to listen to him. And I'll be honest with you, 99% of the stories I get, and since that show, Finding Bigfoot in the Ozarks on Animal Planet, you wouldn't believe how many visits I get, or phone calls, or emails, and everything else. And folks, I love you. I have other things. I got other fish to fry, and I work on other things. But when I hear certain attributes, I will stop and listen. So I will say that. And if I can talk to a family member and see what their conversion is like. That's basically how I can,
Sure.
their conversion. And that's how I look at that. And I was a minister. I still do weddings. I was a minister for 12 years or so. I believe in the supernatural. I don't divorce the supernatural from my natural life. And
Yeah,
that's
me neither. I've
that's
seen
kind of
too much
that's
at this point.
I've seen stuff since I've seen stuff. I've seen a lot of stuff, and so that's what and I I believe there is more truth to mythology than there is fiction. I believe it's based on something. It's just not somebody just making up nursery rhymes and stories. I believe there's substance in those stories somewhere. In anthropology, there's something there, and so I'm not an anthropologist. I don't have time to trace that stuff off, but it's just something in this. Let me just tell you, I was raised in a Pentecostal home, and so I believe in the supernatural. I believe in God doing things, and the Father can do things, and I believe there's an enemy out there that can do things too, and the natural elements can be manipulated. And so I hear things. When I started listening to Cliff, I started hearing supernatural things. That was my first going, oh my goodness, this is supernatural. Here's my problem, and I'm going to be pretty harsh here on ministers. This gentleman went to churches and had a story to share and needed to talk to somebody, and he was shunned. Let me just say, he was shunned, and dadgummit, that just bothers me. That just bothers me because people need to live in their. I'm not trying to be rude here, but people sometimes just want to live in their flannel board Jesus world, and and I believe in Jesus, but I'll tell you what, there's a whole lot more than flannel board Jesus. And I believe there's a supernatural world in there, and I believe the Bigfoot, the some of the real stuff in Bigfoot, I believe there's a supernatural element to it. There's another thing that works with it, how I say that, and yeah, I'm steeping off in theology here, but it works on fear. Fear. The Bible says, for God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of love, power, and a sound mind. And the spirit of fear comes from a different kingdom. And they use fear is used a lot with these entities of Sasquatch. And so
In what way?
Well, if I guess it would be fear. I mean, if you threaten them with shooting them or whatever, and I know of Sasquatch, the people, they're getting ready to pull the trigger, and all of a sudden they hear the voice inside of their head from that Sasquatch, and they are scared stiff enough that they're not going to pull the trigger. Maybe I shouldn't have said it that way, of spirit of fear, but there's more of an element of fear to that. And like I said, I have never been in the woods, and I've never seen one. Man, I've been deer hunting, going into the woods as a teenager at 5 o'clock in the morning when it's pitch dark, and know that something's following me. One time I was relieved to find out it was 3 coon, and so raccoon, and I didn't get a deer. I turned around and shot the 3 raccoon, and so I made money off the hides, but.
Well, I mean, if I encountered a Bigfoot and I happened to be armed, it would cross my mind to shoot said Bigfoot and settle this argument for all time. I'm going to do this for the good of science. Boom. But if something talks to me in my mind, I'm probably going to demur.
That's in every one of the situations that's how it happened.
Right. Like, okay, I won't shoot you, but let's have a talk. Here, stand close to this microphone.
So that's why Cliff started doing what he was doing, of going out into the woods, because he knew that they would communicate with him, and he had to go out unarmed, showing that he is not about to harm them or anything else. And that's what he told me. He says, we go out. That's what we do. You're not going to wear a weapon on you.
Was he able to communicate with them in any meaningful sense, or
he started, well, the family's not going to say anything about it. Well, anyway, I'll just go ahead and say it. He started making contact with them right before he passed away. And when did he pass away? 2000. It was during COVID, right at the end. 2021, February 2021. And so, man, I'll tell you what, we lost something right there when he passed. I'll just be honest with you. And you didn't know the gift you had. And sometimes I think I didn't know the gift I had till it was gone, because I thought, well, I'm going to get to talk with him more and everything else, but it never worked out. So,
yeah, that's the unfortunate reality of our business, is who we should have talked to. I just saw an obituary the other day, and I'm like, damn it, they were on the list.
And
it just didn't happen, you know.
And going back to theologically, there's a Hebrew word for a portal, and it's the word Aruba. It sounds like Aruba, Jamaica, but it's the Hebrew word Aruba. It's for a portal or a window. It can be the windows of heaven. Jacob saw angels descending up and down, going through a portal, and Aruba. And the way, and so I'm like, I got to ask you this, Cliff. I've taken some Hebrew before, and I'm explaining what a portal is, and he's going,
Hmm.
yeah, that's pretty much what I'm thinking right here. He says, but somehow they know where they're at, or they can produce them or something. He says, and um, that's why they can get away, because there are those portals. And so, but and you know, for someone who didn't go to church or anything else, that man had more spiritual savvy on some things. And I'm thinking, oh my goodness, and it's just sad that we
Yeah.
lost him.
Well, the whole portal thing, I think, is a fascinating concept because it answers a whole lot of questions about time and distance that are often not answered, whether you're on the
Right,
UFO thing or the
right.
Bigfoot thing.
And so
Uh,
on the Guardians, I said, do they work? Are they working for other interdimensionals? He says, well, I don't believe in aliens, but I do believe in interdimensionals.
yeah,
Um,
that's kind of where, yeah,
and this is kind of popped up. If you notice in the this past week, I mean, the fever pitch of that is starting to accelerate out there on the internet and the ether sphere and stuff like that, of
yeah,
interdimensionals and stuff like that. And I, which he said, you know, you can be a Bigfoot researcher, but he says if you just focus on that, he says you're going to miss the other aspects. He said it's so. He started out just looking at Bigfoot, but over time he started looking at other things. They're all interconnected. He believed there's a lot of interconnection there, and so, but the Guardians, he says they're guardians. I'm like, Guardians of the Galaxy. You know, I'm just thinking, what are they
right.
guarding? He said, I don't know, but he says they're responsible for something. And he gave me a scripture in Job chapter, in the first chapter of Job. Hasatan, Satan comes before the Lord, and the Lord says, the Father says, "What are you doing? What have you been doing?" He says, "I've been roaming to and fro in the earth, to and
Wow.
fro in the earth." And so we talked about that, and I said, so for him to pop up into that council and have a talk with Father Yahweh, and then all of a sudden he popped down here and go to and fro throughout the earth. That could be a portal, and so that's why I don't know. Um, I never intended in my life to go off down this rabbit hole, but um, it happened, and I'm supposed to be this academic historian, but yet on a personal level, I believe in the supernatural also, and so I believe there are wild men. I believe there are those, but then I also believe that there could be a very of the Sasquatch being of interdimensionals. I've never
Even
said
if,
that on camera.
even if they're, well, and yeah, but even if they're not interdimensional, even if there are not portals,
Right.
we have this whole, it's funny, some of the, in the same era as the Wild Man articles, another thing that has kind of come full circle now is giants, as there were
Yes.
reports of giants. Now, I followed down some of these that were local, and I believe one was outside of Springfield.
Right.
And with every with every issue of the daily paper, the giant got smaller and smaller and smaller until it was described he was about 6 feet, and
You start at
the
7 feet.
body wasn't that old.
That's where I'm going with Osage warriors.
Yeah. This
I,
was
I, I
thought to be a Civil War era grave, but
okay.
still, it was. He started off at 10 feet, and by the end of the week, he was at 6 feet after a few people had kind of put him together.
Yeah.
So there's a
And
lot of that out there in the in the press of the time, and it's um, but
right.
then if you say you have these beings, then the question becomes, what about a body? And so
Right.
my thought is there a body?
I get it. Um, Back to the Christian view of having giants here in the Ozarks, and they are 7 to 8 feet. I'm going to say those, in my opinion, those are not Nephilim. Those are not giants. Those are not like Goliath. Those are Native American, most likely Osage warriors from George Catlin's um, books and his writings of with the Osage. The Osage were so influential. They were even involved with the St. Louis founders of the chateaus and that family there. It's just so influential with the French, and so I'm just I. I say if you're on this stream of like if they're 7 feet, 7.5 feet tall, don't mix it with the Nephilim biblically, because I honestly believe those that are that height, those are going to be Native American warriors, in my opinion. And now there are stories of giants um pre-Columbus and things like that, and I don't have a problem with those being Nephilim. There were giants in the earth and afterwards in those days, from Genesis chapter 6. It talks about we have Goliath, and so he could be anywhere from 9 to 11 feet tall, and that's a whole different species than. And I believe those are had supernatural mixing and genetic manipulation with that, and so that's where I come from biblically. That's where I settle on that. But I think we don't want to mix what Native American with the Nephilim.
Well, and just because every species at some point in its evolution has this sense of giganticism and or displays giganticism.
Right,
The closest living relative to a Tyrannosaurus Rex or a Velociraptor is the common chicken. Right
right,
now, that was a period of giganticism in that evolution.
right,
So to think that amongst the known primates that we have found a fossil record or an archaeological record of, there is variation from childlike small on up to primates. I'm not saying hominids. Let's just say everything's a primate that are large, huge. And of the living primates today, there are large primates living, gorillas.
right. Oh yes,
So to think that there's not some sort of genetic diversity amongst primate species in the past and that maybe when you dig some of these fossil record or some of these places up, that's what you're looking at rather than a
right.
human skeleton. I don't know the answer.
I
Uh,
don't either. Uh,
I'm just
I
saying that it's very close-minded to think that we have all these solutions, because when I was in grade school, UFOs and Bigfoot and the Kennedy assassination were all in this little group of books next to movie monsters and the Loch Ness monster and a bunch of other stuff. And I haven't given up hope on the Loch Ness monster yet,
I
but
haven't
some of these
either.
others are looking a little more real now.
Hey,
So,
hey, I was an earlier believer. My mom worked in a grocery store when I was a kid, and so I went to that magazine section where the Bigfoots were at, and the UFO, and I got those magazines, and so
yeah. What was it? True magazine? What was the magazine that was the little small one, kind of an Art
oh
Bell like thing? Weird News or whatever. Anyway,
oh, I remember that. Yeah.
yeah,
But in retrospect, for myself personally, I don't have a problem with the supernatural, with the natural on Earth.
yeah.
And so, but I do like to parse through. Um, I want to parse through the big stories, things that might get a little stretched out of hand. It's my goal. there's traditions and tales to tell, but on my historian side, I want to see some concrete stuff. I want to see rebar, I want to see some solid things here, and so that's my goal, is to do that. And like I said, I never intended to go down this area. It just started out from Sci-Fi Channel to Animal Planet, and honestly, I've had other opportunities to do other shows, even twice this year already, and I'm like, nah, I'm done. Um, I'm not trying to recreate any woo woo from 1990s or 2000s. I'm done with that. There's other things that are solid that I'm after to study. But I do have a good foundation on, and I'm like I said, I'm blessed to know Clifford LeBrock. Learned a lot from the man. So,
Well, Vince, how can people follow you and keep up with your writing? Would you please let us know?
Well, the best way to really do it is to I do a lot of writing and small blurbs and stuff on Facebook, and that's what I really do. And so if you go to Vincent S. Anderson, and if you just put into Google for Facebook, Vincent Anderson, Ozarks history, you're going to find me. And I love the White River Valley, and so I did my thesis on the White River of 1888 and the history of the White River Valley and the things that were going on with the travel and everything else. And so I would just Vincent Anderson, Ozarks history. If you type that into Google or whatever, you're gonna find me. I also have a website called Ozarks History Blogspot. I don't post that much to that anymore because I was doing so much on the radio. But that's basically where I'm at right now.
It's been an amazing time. There are stories of things out in the woods that you may or may not be seeing in the future. I hope this episode's caused you to look a little deeper in our beautiful Ozarks countryside. Maybe you don't believe in Bigfoot, but maybe you look up in the trees not to see a figure, but to see the beauty of nature. I want to thank Vince for joining us this evening. Check out his books, which are available under the name Vincent Anderson on Amazon. If you've enjoyed this episode, give us a like, share it on Facebook among the home folks. Be sure to follow us on Facebook for additional content and information. If you're feeling really charitable, please give us that 5-star review. It won't hurt, I promise, and it helps us grow and improve the podcast. Thank you kindly. Have a story that's too good to keep? We more than likely want to hear it. Drop us a line at wildnwooly, that's WILDNWOOLY, wildnwooly, Ozarks @gmail.com. If you haven't checked out past episodes or new episodes that are on the way, follow us on Facebook. Got some really great stuff out there. Did one recently on white deer, based on a story I originally did for the Marshfield Mail on the white deer north of Marshfield that appeared a few years back. Also, it goes into the Ozark folk medicine tradition of mad stones. Something to check out. It's a fun one for a drive through the countryside. Also, check out our others. We've had some true crime, and we've had some mystery, and we got more of that coming up. And then I've got some entertaining things along the way that I want to share with you, so we're excited to bring that to you. If you like our new format, there's one feller behind that, and that's Paul Hambrick, friend, producer, and all-around Renaissance man. He's doing a great job. He has a little band in an Ohio Blue Tip matchbox, and he opens it up, and there you go. You can hear it now. By the way, in lack of further legal jargon, the Wild and Woolly Ozarks is a creation of Jared Crawford, the Heron Boys, and myself. currently its own lock, stock, and barrel by Klein Champion Heron III. Any reproduction is unlawful. Of course, if you ask nice and don't appear crazy, chance is I'll give you permission. Please follow the rules lest I have to call out the bald knobbers on you. Well, until next time, you all be careful, and boys, if you would, please be good to the tourists. Bye now.